Well, all right, everybody. Thank you for joining this episode of Unscripted. What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. Uh, it's been quite crazy. I'm not going to lie to you. It's been a little crazy. I done spilt my glass like 2 times now. God knows how much money that was, but hey, it is what it is. Um, hey, we're going to talk a lot of sports. I mean, a lot of sports, ladies and gentlemen. And usually my graphics, oh, look, my graphics are working now. Thank goodness. They weren't working earlier. I guess God must have heard me. And my graphics are now finally working. But yeah, man. Hey, listen, the Astros, I just want to kind of open it up. I was really worried about the Astros and their pitching situation. For the most part, I was worried about it because I didn't think we were going to get Verlander. And I'm like, okay, man, we don't get Verlander. That's like $45 million. I didn't think Jim Crane was going to spend that kind of money anyway. But at least, if nothing else, at least just get me Montero. Because that's part of our closing rotation, right? You got Presley, Montero, Abreu. Those are kind of our three big guys in terms of seventh, eighth, and ninth innings and security. And if you know anything about Montero, you know that Montero was part of those no hitters. One was with the Yankees, and clearly one was with the Astros when they took out, I believe it was game 4, if I'm not mistaken, it was game 3 or game 4. Once it was game 4, and he was part of that no hitter as well. So I really wanted us to get back, if nothing else, Montero. And thankfully, they got him signed up for 3 more years. So what a day in their life, man. What a day in the life. Dustin, if you're listening, I just sent you the link via Messenger. Give me 1 sec. I'll try to get it to you via text message. But I definitely sent it to you in Messenger. And I might be able to even do it this direction, Dustin. I tell you what, brother, man. This might even be easier for you. Let me see if I can put it directly into the chat, and then you can hop on and we can talk some baseball and everything else that's going on in the world. There it is, Dustin. It's in your messenger and it's in the chat. If you want to hop on, hop on. Let's go, baby, all day. But again, we got Montero, 3 years, $34 million. It almost makes spilling my Jack Daniels worth it. Almost. But hey, listen, lots of other things, right? Clayton Kershaw. Let's talk Clayton Kershaw. He signed another 1-year deal to stay with the Dodgers, right? And I believe he signed it for $17 million. The qualifying offer was $19 million. Go figure. I don't know why he would take $17 million when his qualifying was $19 million. But he wound up taking $17 million, took another deal with the Dodgers, and they're gonna continue mission. And again, it's not a done deal yet. I believe I don't think it's been signed, but it's definitely been put out. I know he has accepted it. So I think it's probably just a matter of signing the paperwork and it's going to get done. But again, you know, he was 12-3 last year. He gave you a 2.28 ERA with 107 strikeouts, and he actually made it through a season. Go figure. My question is, you know, can he make it? You know, how's he going to do next year and the year after? Because with Clayton Kershaw, it really is hit or miss, which is why I'm not too terribly upset with Verlander if he doesn't re-sign with the Astros. Verlander's 39, coming off Tommy John. Yes, he had a Cy Young. Yes, he got a World Series. But at 39, I'm skeptical on how many years I'm going to give him that $45 million. Stat guy, the man who knows all about baseball. Appreciate you joining the show. How's everything going, my brother?
Good. I've been at basketball all day for my son's tournament today, so I just got home not that long ago.
Nice. We're also basketball myself. Savannah's got a little semi-pro team that plays, and we played South Carolina. Savannah played South Carolina. It was actually a pretty good basketball game. I was telling my wife, I thought it was kind of funny. I looked at her and I said, man, if this is semi-pro, like 8 of the guys on the damn court are like 5'9", and I said, I don't mean 8, like all. I'm gonna say like on both. If you look at both teams combined, whatever. I mean, Dustin, they were small. I was like, holy shit! I think I'm taller at least 4 of those guys that are out there, and this is semi-pro. So do with that information as you will.
We were just about to eat some cupcakes. Would you like to share with us?
But yeah, man, we're talking baseball right now. Like I said earlier, Montero signed 3 years, $34 million. We know that Houston, their starting pitching rotation is pretty solidified, even without Verlander. They're still pretty strong, right? And if I go from bottom to top, it would be Garcia, Urquidy, Javier, McCullers, and then you would have Framber Valdez. And that didn't even compensate the new starting pitcher they brought up halfway through the season, Hunter Brown. We all know that he came up and he pitched really good in the limited time that the Astros gave him. So I don't know. I'm really worried about the starting pitching. I was really kind of worried about getting Montero because, again, they got Abreu under contract, Stanek's under contract, Preston's under contract. They have Montos or Mateo, wherever that Matan, he's under contract. But really, one guy I want to make sure they got under contract was Montero because we know that Montero has played exceptionally well throughout the season and then obviously in the postseason. But, Verlander's out there, and that really kind of is the big question. Verlander's out there. We know Kershaw's nearing his signing of his extension. DeGrom was made a qualifying offer. But if you're the Astros, he opted out of $25 million. We know that DeGrom has got $45 million he just came off of. He's 39 damn years old. Is he gonna? How long can he possibly get? And should the Astros give him the money?
It's a triangle.
If I'm the Astros, I let Justin Verlander walk, no matter what he's meant to the franchise and no matter what he's brought to the franchise, because you have a guy that is 39 years old. He's already had 2 Tommy John surgeries, so he's not going to be pitching at the level that he pitched at this year much longer. And then you have to look at kind of the middle of the season where the Chicago Cubs had a trade in place with Houston, Wilson Contreras for that Urquidy, and Dusty Baker basically said he didn't want to trade Urquidy, so you got to wonder if that's kind of been Houston's plan all along was once Verlander leaves, you just put Urquidy back in the rotation and you still have basically a very solid starting 5.
Yeah, no doubt. And let me ask you this, based off of that, we know he's coming off of Cy Young. He had like a 1.75 ERA in the regular season. He didn't have such a good dominant postseason, but he played well enough, and he did get that 1 win. So, but I think we saw in the postseason some chinks in his armor. How much longer do you think he's going to have that Cy Young type of pitching stuff, and when do you think he starts to decline?
I think it's going to be kind of similar to Adam Wainwright, where it's a year-by-year thing, where he's coming off a Cy Young year this year, so obviously someone's going to pay for his services next year. Now it's just a matter of how much success does he have next year. If he still goes out and gives you 15, maybe 16 wins with an ERA in the low 3s, well, that's not Cy Young worthy, but that's still a very valuable frontline starter. He'll have another year after that. I think he's going to just have to go year by year, and when he starts to maybe struggle more consistently, I think that's when you start to see the whole this is kind of the end of the rope for Verlander type of thing. And given that he's had the multiple arm trouble in the past, I think it'll hit him a lot quicker than it's going to hit some other people.
So my question, and it really is it's a 2-part question, but very simple answers, really. First is, do you think there's a team out there that will give Justin Verlander the $45 million? Honestly, I think he'd probably even take 35. I think if you offer Justin 35, I think he probably even takes that. But do you offer him the $35 or $45 million contract? And then 2, do you stick with the 1-year plan, or do you go multiple years? And I think I don't even know if Verlander's asking for multiple years.
I can see the Yankees giving him it, just because the Yankees have no trouble paying people whatever they want anyways. And if Aaron Judge doesn't come back, that's going to open up a lot of spending for the Yankees at that point. So I can definitely see the Yankees as one of those teams to go after Verlander. I wouldn't be shocked at all if the Yankees were to give him like a 2-year $70, 2-year $75 million deal. Otherwise, I think he'll be in a similar situation to Adam Wainwright, where it's a 1-year $30 million deal if you pitch well, we'll re-up you again for a 1 year, $30 million deal. Kind of similar situation what Clayton Kershaw's in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, if anybody is ever in the market and you're a podcaster, don't ever get this mouse. And if you can see those two little buttons that are right there, those buttons, I swear to God, it only takes a hair. If you breathe on that damn button, it clicks you off the damn link. I'm just saying. Don't ever get that mouse. They suck. But yeah, man. Oh man, he had a good run for the Astros, but I think you're right, man. I think the Astros, they got everything they need, and I don't think they need to necessarily overspend for Verlander. I think they got everything, currently they have. What I would like to see them do with that $45 million is make sure they go after guys like, Vasquez, Gurriel, possibly Mancini.
I wouldn't even go after Gurriel at this point because Gurriel is 39. I would go after Mancini because he's 30. You can lock him up for 3 or 4 years as opposed to Gurriel for 1 year. You already have a 33, 34-year-old Martin Maldonado. Do you want a 33-year-old Vasquez with him?
Maybe you go after Wilson Contreras.
I was going to say, if you really want to catch or go after Wilson Contreras and try to get him for 5 years.
And I think they need to go after Wilson Contreras. They need a catcher that can take over when Maldonado decides to call it a day. And you're right with Gurriel. The only thing I like about Gurriel is for some reason, I know he's 39, but for some damn reason, that guy, he'll lay low for a while hitting. And I swear to God, when you get to the big moments in postseason, I don't know what goes on in Gurriel's head, but he just livens up. And he'll give you, those quality at-bats that you need at the weirdest times. You know what I mean? I think if it wasn't for Gurriel, there's a couple of games there where maybe the Astros don't get those sparks, and I think it could have been a different outcome. There's several times where a guy like Gurriel, McCormick, they just play those, those roles with the Astros that weren't necessarily the Pena name or the Alvarez name or so forth, and they just kind of go overlooked sometimes. But we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, the other player they got to save that $45 million to is someone that really nobody talks about, and that's Michael Brantley. Michael Brantley was injured this year, which I understand, but when that guy's in the lineup, Houston's lineup is that much more dangerous and that much more deeper because he is the perfect leadoff hitter for baseball. He hits for average, doesn't give you a ton of pop, but he doesn't need to. He's not a super fast base runner, but he's just one of those old school hitters that's going to hit at 310, 315 every single season. You put him at the top of your lineup with the rest of that Houston lineup, that's a more dangerous lineup. So they definitely need to save something for him to try to lock him up for another 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me about Brantley is sometimes he tends to get hurt. You know what I mean? And I question his health a little bit. That's the only thing that worries me about him. But if he can come back and stay healthy, just like you said, man, he is a damn good hitter, and he really has that locker room presence, and he knows how to motivate his teammates, to get them back in the groove. So you want a guy like that in your locker room. So yeah, again, Brantley, I wouldn't mind if they bring back Brantley and do some of that $45 million towards that. And again, the Astros, they gave a qualifying offer to the GM, but as you can see, the GM basically said hell no. And so now the Astros going to go find themselves a GM. So
I don't understand that move, and I don't
understand it either.
So there had to be some sort of tension behind the scenes that nobody knew about, because the guy's taken them to 3 World Series in the last 7 years. He's won 2 of them, and he's coming off of a World Series win this year. How do you not extend him beyond the qualifying offer? There had to be some sort of tension or something behind the scenes where they didn't want him back.
And let's be honest, bringing Mancini and bringing Vasquez in at that point in time, not so much on the Mancini side, even though Mancini did get some contributing factors there, but bringing a guy like Vasquez in, and he gave you that, he was part of that no hitter in Philly, and Vasquez has done quite well, and he does give you a little pop at the bat in the offense. I mean, he brought in some guys that contributed. They did their part, and they were part of that World Series team. I don't know why you don't give the guy that money. I don't care if he got tension or not. Put your differences aside. Do what's best for the ball club, because he's doing it and it's working. And why would you want to screw up something that's working? I'll never understand that. I don't understand it. I'm just glad that at least they signed Dusty Baker. I don't know how much longer Dusty Baker is going to be able to coach, but I like Dusty. He obviously played his part. So, oh man, moving on to Thursday night's game between the Panthers and the Falcons. Wow. You know, my mind wonders, can Tom Brady go against the Seahawks, went out there in Germany, and take sole possession of the division? Because right now they were tied, but obviously, as you can see, Atlanta wasn't able to pull it off, and they lost 25-15. But holy cow. When Christian McCaffrey left the Panthers, I thought they were going to go further down the twos. But luckily, and thank God he's on my team, Foreman is just playing like a beast. He had 31 carries, 130 yards, and a touchdown. What a time to be alive. Walker was very, very anemic in his passing. He only went 10 for 16 at 108 yards, but he didn't turn the ball over, so that's a good thing. They rushed he rushed 3 times for 14 yards. So he's able to produce, a little bit there. But quite honestly, that was all straight up Carolina's run and Atlanta's inability to stop the run. And Horn did get that interception off Mariota, and Mariota was sacked 5 times. So the Falcons couldn't stop the run. They did generate a little bit of run. It was actually 232 to 138. But I will be honest with you, Carolina defense and Foreman's running gave that team that win over the Atlanta Falcons. And I don't know, man, can Tom Brady complete the quest out there in Germany and beat Seattle and take sole possession? What was your thought process, or what is your thought process?
Well, my thought process from Thursday was we watched 2 XFL quarterbacks go at it because neither one of those quarterbacks deserves to be a starter in the NFL.
Yeah.
Both of them played terrible. I understand that Atlanta really doesn't have much of an answer, but for how much Marcus Mariota struggled in that game, you would have thought that Arthur Smith would have given Desmond Ridder a chance, especially when you're in a tie for first at that point. What do you have to lose if you're already struggling in that game anyways? Bring Ridder in and see what he can do. Carolina's in the middle of a different situation where Sam Darnold's hurt. Baker Mayfield was your starter and then ended up getting benched because he really didn't do much when he was in there. And then you bring in P.J. Walker, who the team has looked a lot better with P.J. Walker playing, but he's still not the answer there, so they're going to be in the market for a new quarterback next year.
Oh, yeah.
I think more so than with Carolina right now than Atlanta, I think getting rid of Matt Rule and giving the interim job to Steve Wilkes has kind of really helped that Panthers team. Rule was never cut out to be an NFL head coach, and he kind of proved that in his 3 years as a head coach versus Steve Wilkes was the head coach for 1 year in Arizona and then left, and there's still a lot left unanswered as to why he left after 1 year, but I think if he has a good finish to this season, that could really help him try to land a job next year. Tampa Bay, I don't think Tampa Bay wins against Seattle tomorrow. I just think Geno Smith and that Seattle team is playing way too well right now. They're scoring a lot more points than what Tampa Bay is scoring. So for as good as Tampa's defense is, Tampa Bay still got to score points, which is something they have not done. But I think Tampa Bay still wins that division by default.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely agree with you, man. Speaking of coaches, and by the way, I think, when it comes to PJ Walker, I think Walker is either A, backup, or C, a practice squad quarterback. And Mariota, I just think he's a backup quarterback. I'll give the backup quarterback. But yeah, neither one, like you said, neither one of those guys are a starting quarterback. And I don't think either one of them will ever be a starting quarterback because, they're both putting on age. They're not getting any younger. They're not like just turn into something better than what they already are. If they would have done it at a much earlier time span than what they are currently right now. But again, when we talk about coaches, now we're looking at the coach tagging up Saturday as the interim, and Joe Thomas, I think his name is Joe. I know he was a offensive lineman there with the Colts for a while back in the day, and I believe he was there with Saturday. He thought it was very disrespectful to the team and whatnot that they would give a guy who basically has no head coach experience at the pro or college level, has no assistant offensive coordinator experience at the pro or college level. He's basically a high school coach that was a former, Pro Bowler in the NFL, and now you're just going to give him the reins to the NFL. I think he'd have been better off just staying with Reich if that's the case, because what is Saturday going to do for you?
I think,
you know what I mean?
yeah, I know what you mean, but I think Saturday was more so brought in as more of a culture-saving move, mainly because you hear guys like Jonathan Taylor that are starting to get kind of fed up with the situation, and Jonathan Taylor's trying to maybe get traded out of there. You have a lot of the good defensive players in that team that are trying to force a trade out of there because of the position that the team is in. I think you bring in a guy like Jeff Saturday. It's a guy that's had success in Indianapolis. It's a guy that knows the culture. It's a guy that knows what it takes to be successful in Indianapolis. So bringing him in, I think they're hoping that he can just get everyone to trust him a little bit, get Jonathan Taylor and get some of these guys to want to stay in Indianapolis long term, and then that'll help them set up who they want to have as the next head coach after this year, because Saturday is a consultant for that team, so he is around that franchise, and he's been around that franchise all year in a consultant role, so this whole roster knows who he is, and this whole roster's already had to deal with him in some aspects during the year.
Let me ask you this. They got rid of the offensive coordinator. They got rid of Reich. Who the hell is he going to rely on to help him call plays? Does he even know how to draw up plays? You know what I'm saying? Like, I just see him being a deer in headlights. He can tell them about what a culture looks like, but I don't think at the head coach level he can develop that culture or show them that culture, because he's going to be a damn deer out there with headlights. So I don't know how you change a culture when you're going to go out there and look like a freaking moron on the damn sidelines, because you don't know what the hell you're doing.
The big thing with Jeff Saturday is he was a 6-time Pro Bowl offensive lineman. And that is the biggest weakness of the Colts this year, is their offensive line, which oddly enough was the biggest strength on that team last year, which is why Jonathan Taylor had the year he had last year. You know damn well with Jeff Saturday now being the interim head coach, he's getting his hands on that offensive line group, and he's doing work with that offensive line group. He's going to be doing a lot of work to get them back on pace.
I get that. I have no problems with them bringing in, a different interim head coach and having Jeff Saturday be in there helping out the offensive line. If anything, give Saturday the offensive line coaching job and let him change the culture on the offensive line. And that way he'll start getting coaching experience. But to put him directly at the head coaching spot, number one, if I'm the defensive coordinator of that team, I'm looking at this guy like, the fuck are you? Number one. And number two, I'm thinking like, well, what am I, chopped liver? You couldn't make the defensive coordinator the head coaching job? How do you explain that?
Yeah, the whole team in Indianapolis is in disarray right now. I don't know what their plans are beyond this year. I don't even think Irsay is going to be around after this year. I think he's going to be out the door. I think it's going to be a complete overhaul from the top down. And it wouldn't surprise me at all to see the Colts bring back Peyton Manning as either the GM or the head coach next year. It really wouldn't.
I could definitely see him being a GM type of guy.
Yeah, I think Peyton Manning would easily come back to Indianapolis to be the GM. You get Peyton Manning to come back into that organization as a GM, you know he's going to figure out how to get a very good head coach in there. You know he's going to figure out
he'll be just like a John Elway was for the Broncos. Elway had a lot of success, we know, with the Broncos when he got his Super Bowl as a GM there. So I can see him absolutely doing that.
The biggest problem that Elway had was he had no idea how to draft a quarterback, and he really had no idea how to find quarterback talent, which is why he went through so many quarterbacks as the Broncos GM. I don't think Peyton Manning has that problem at all. I think Peyton Manning would be able to find a quarterback his first year in the NFL draft or in free agency or whatever, and I think he'd be able to build that roster the way he wants it to be built, because one thing about that Manning family, they know football, and they know how to have successful football, and that's something that Manning, I think, would bring to the table. So if Irsay is out the door, I would not be surprised to see Peyton Manning come in as the GM. And if he's the GM, then you're going to see a very interesting offseason by the Colts.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you as well. I'm gonna kind of turn our attention over to one more thing real quick before we get into the slides. I was reading some stuff on Hooker today, and I kind of started thinking about I can't I hope I get his name right, Henderson Hooker. Um, he's 25 years old. The University of Tennessee is doing well this year, but they don't really have a knack of developing pro style quarterbacks that are ready for the draft. That's not really in their forte. He does have a 70% completion rate. He does have a smoother release, and he is an instinctive quarterback. And I think you see a lot of that, with his ability to run with his legs when the play breaks down. You can see him seeing those things. I do think, the internal clock is still developing within him. The improved ball security is still kind of an issue with 17 fumbles. He does have good size hands. For a quarterback, he's got 10.5-inch hands. So definitely got good hand size. But again, I don't think Tennessee does a lot in the way of preparing their quarterbacks to be ready for the NFL style. So where do you see him getting drafted this year? Do you see him as a first round, a second round? Where would you put Hooker if you had to put him in terms of being drafted?
He's going to be a first-round pick based on the season he's had this year and based on his potential. I don't think he's going to be the first quarterback taken. I don't think he's going to be the second quarterback taken. But I think he'll be the third quarterback off the board, which would probably put him in that 12 to 20 range, somewhere in there, depending on who falls in that range.
Right.
He's not your prototypical pro-style quarterback, but he has the tools to be a pro-style quarterback in the right system. But then again, he also has the tools to not be a pro-style quarterback in a different type of system, just depending on the system you put him in. And I think just seeing what he's done this year and seeing the potential that he has, there are going to be teams that reach for him in the draft, but it might be the best reach that they could make, and it could also be the worst reach that they can make depending on how it pans out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then, because I was looking at, I think he's only thrown like 2 interceptions this year. I don't think he's thrown anything more than 2. Like he's had a very low turnover ratio, which is incredible.
Yeah, I think he's got 4 because I think he threw 2 against Georgia. So he might have.
Is it 4 altogether?
Yeah,
I was thinking 2, but okay. Either way, even with 4, he's very low on the turnover ratio outside the fumbles that he's had, which, like I said, he's only had 17. So, it is what it is. But, I think it's going to be whoever gets him, they're going to – if they have a really good, strong developmental quarterback coach, they can make this guy into something special. I really believe that.
Yeah. Because, last year he had 31 touchdowns and 3 interceptions last year. This year he's got 21 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So in 2 years he's got 52 touchdowns and 5 interceptions the last 2 years.
Crazy. All right, we're going to get into some college football. As you know, there are a lot of really good games on the line this week. We saw LSU get that close win over Arkansas, 13-10. But I got to be honest with you, man. At number 7, LSU looked like crap. They got the win, and congratulations. You got the win, but damn, you look terrible. Daniels only gave you 86 yards and an interception. Williams was your saving grace, who gave you 122 yards and a touchdown. But what really gave you the win was Arkansas's inability to also, pass the ball. I think he had like 96 yards or something like that. So what helped out LSU was the fact that Arkansas had no offense either. And the fact that you had a really good running game, really, got you that win. My concern is going to be when LSU heads to Atlanta, and unless something crazy and Georgia doesn't make it there, they got to go up against Georgia in the SEC showdown. So let's look at that scenario one. Number one, what did you think about LSU going against Arkansas today? And then number 2, if Arkansas meets a team like Georgia, you kind of already can put. Personally, I think you can already put Georgia as an SEC champion. But how do you see it, that guy?
I don't necessarily say it was kind of a letdown game for LSU because they were playing on the road. playing on the road in the SEC is never an easy place to play. And Arkansas, even though they are 2-4 in conference and 5-4 overall, they've been prone to give people a tough matchup. So that didn't surprise me. You can kind of call it maybe a hangover game because you look at what happened after Tennessee beat Alabama. They moved all the way up to number 1, and then they shit the bed against Georgia the next week. I kind of see a similar situation at LSU here, where LSU upsets Alabama in LSU, and they have such an emotional win. They're riding such that emotional high all week, and they go into Arkansas and they pretty much lay an egg. But they were at least able to recover and hung on 13-10. So I'm not taking too much stock away from this game, anyways. But if they go to Atlanta to play Georgia, I think Georgia beats them by 21. I don't think LSU even is in the game for more than a half.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that point. On earlier games today, we saw Tennessee destroy Missouri 66-24. We saw Ohio at number 2 destroy Indiana 56-14. So those guys are definitely looking like, top 4 teams. Again, now we got TCU playing Texas currently, and they're in the second quarter with about 12 minutes and 8 seconds left in the half, and they are still at 0-0 with Texas, but TCU just got the interception, and they're at the 35-yard line on Texas, so we'll see what happens there. But again, that's going to be a big-time game for TCU. And then we look at the earlier game, again, Alabama and Ole Miss. And, of course, Ole Miss took the loss on that one, 17-10. Now, I saw the interview with Nick Saban at the end of the game, and the one thing he took away from it was he said he saw his boys bouncing back. He saw them, showing the old Alabama spirit. If you ask me, I watched that game, and Ole Miss had a chance to win it. It was like a minute and 53 seconds left in the game. They got it all the way down to I think the 20-yard line of Alabama. The first 2 plays went nowhere. Matter of fact, they got to 3rd and 16 to get a first down, and it would have been 3rd and 20 to get the touchdown. So rather than trying to just get to the first down marker, they're trying to get to the end zone. And the first thing that he does, and I forget the Ole Miss quarterback, Parker, I think is his name. He tries to do a bootleg around, runs right into the defender of Alabama, I think it was Young, and just gets hammered. Now it's 4th and 16. They try to throw the ball. It gets batted down in the end zone. Again, there's nobody even around the 5-yard line. Everybody's in deep in the end zone. Why they didn't have that guy try to come back to it or have somebody down in the middle just to catch the ball and try to get at least to the 4-yard line, I don't understand. But, man, I mean, they were close. Alabama was extremely, extremely close to losing that game. And, again, Saban, got it by the nick of his teeth. What did you think about Bama, or what does it tell you about Bama and Ole Miss? Because had Ole Miss won that game, then now you're looking at possibly Ole Miss getting a chance to go to play Georgia or whoever in the SEC championship.
I guess what that game really tells me is the SEC is no longer a 2-team league anymore where it's Georgia and Alabama.
Right.
The SEC is much better. It is much deeper. And they are showing that, records aside, there's probably 7 teams in that conference that could have competed for the SEC title this year. It's just a matter that Georgia and Alabama are still, and now Tennessee this year are still the head of the class, so they're going to win most of those games. But Ole Miss would be a conference champion in pretty much any other conference in this league. Mississippi State would be a higher-ranked team if they were in a different conference. LSU would be a conference champion if they were in another conference. It just goes to show you how much deeper this conference has gotten in the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with you. And to the point where now you're right, man. It used to be Alabama, we were thinking who's going to win it, who's going to win the title out of SEC or even the SEC championship. And now that's not the case anymore. Now they're, like you said, you got LSU, you got Georgia, you got Ole Miss, that's making waves. I mean, you got these other teams, in Tennessee that are making waves now, and it's just not the clear cut Alabama all the time. And I love seeing that because I got to admit, it got really, really freaking boring, with Alabama always there and nobody really giving them competition. You know what I mean?
So yeah, that was the thing with me. Like, I don't mind if Alabama's always there because if they earn it, they earn it. They deserve to be there. My big issue with it was Alabama used to go through their schedule and just blow people out. They were never challenged at any point during the season, and I think that's why a lot of people got bored with Alabama being there as much as they were because they were never challenged on their way to get there. Now Alabama is actually getting challenged. Teams like Georgia are actually getting challenged, so they're actually earning their way to the SEC championship more so now than they did before. So if Alabama or Georgia keeps making it to the SEC title game or keeps making it to the college football playoffs, I'm fine with it as long as they continue to be challenged at the level they have been this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then we kind of, turn our attention over a little bit to the Georgia and Mississippi State game. And right now that game is at 17-12, and they are currently at halftime. So Georgia's only up by 5 over Mississippi State. And Georgia put up 7 points in the first, 10 in the second, and then Mississippi State came back. Oh, excuse me, I apologize. Came back and put 12 points in the second quarter before half. So it's like they were kind of getting the momentum in the direction right before halftime. So it's going to make that third quarter, I think, pretty interesting to see how that comes out and play. Anything surprise you about that Georgia or Mississippi State game?
Again, not really. You're playing on the road in the SEC. And Mississippi State, I believe they're 6-3 or so. Yeah, I think they're 6-3. Which
6-3.
That's a good record. They're bowl eligible. They're going to go to a bowl game. But a 6-3 Mississippi State team would be a conference champion or a conference runner-up in the Pac-12 or the Big Ten or any of these other conferences if they didn't have to go through Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and any of these other teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like with 3 seconds left in the game, 3 seconds left in the game, Thorson punt for 36 yards, and Thomas returns 63 yards for a touchdown. So Mississippi was able to run back for 63 yards. And, of course, that took them to halftime. So, man, talk about, momentum shifter at the end. So, again, man, we'll see what happens as that game unfolds as well. And then we had the Oregon game, which was the other one. And Washington is currently beating number 6 Oregon 13-10 at the half. Wow. What if Oregon loses to Washington State and they're number 6?
See, that's the thing with the Pac-12. Everybody in the Pac-12 knows that you're not going to be going to the college football playoffs unless you win out and you get help. At this point, Oregon has the only shot in the Pac-12 to actually make the college football playoffs. So if they want a shot at that, they got to win out, and they need a ton of help. I personally don't think they get it anyways, just because even a one-loss Ohio State team or even a one-loss Michigan team is better than Oregon, and that loss that Michigan or Ohio State's going to have is going to come against each other. So You're not going to drop one of those two teams out of the top 4 because they're going to be probably 2-3 when that game goes on. And the winner probably stays at 2. The loser will probably drop from 3 to 4. Then you have Georgia at number 1, and then you have TCU, I believe, at number 4 right now. I'm not going to put TCU over Tennessee either, in my opinion. I think it's going to be Georgia, Tennessee, Ohio State, and Michigan at the end of the year.
Man, what a time to be alive. That's going to be let me ask you this. If LSU, and I don't see it happening, but, hey, we all know that things can happen left and right. If LSU were to beat Georgia, how far would Georgia slip? In your opinion?
What was the question, Jay?
So if Georgia was to lose to LSU in the SEC showdown, how far do you think Georgia slides?
Realistically, I think they would slide to number 2. And the only reason why I say that is if Georgia loses to LSU, that means there's only one undefeated team left, and that's going to be Ohio State.
Interesting, because in my mind, I was thinking they might slide to 3. I thought it might be because, and again,
you're not going to move Tennessee ahead of them because they beat Tennessee.
Right.
You're not going to move 5. You're not going to move LSU from 7 to number 1.
Right.
So, I mean, unless TCU runs the table and can somehow sneak up to number 2 and Georgia falls to number 3, but the winner of that Ohio State-Michigan game would move to number 1 if Georgia loses the SEC title game, and you really can't drop Georgia really any lower than 2.
No, I understand. And that was going to be my next question is, the winner of that Michigan-Ohio, like you said, I would go to 2. I have no problem with that. But where would the loser go with that?
I think they fall to 4.
So you think that, no matter what, do you have that 4? The 4 that are currently there right now, I mean, obviously if TCU
the only one I don't have in there right now is TCU. I would swap TCU and Tennessee. Otherwise, the top 3 I'm leaving in there.
But if TCU wins out and doesn't lose, do you have them still possibly sliding out of the 4 anyway?
Yeah. Just because you have to look at the body of work that TCU has and the body of work that Tennessee has. And if Tennessee's only loss is to number 1 Georgia and they can't play in the SEC championship game because of it, can you really hold it against them? They lost to the number 1 team in the country on the road.
Yeah, there's so many, controversial things there. Because I've heard, we all know with the ASAP network, a lot of people will say, well, strength of schedule. Some people will say record. I mean, there's so many controversies to that. But I understand the body of work that Tennessee's done and the body of work that TCU. But I don't want to discount TCU.
I'm not discounting TCU at all. I think
because they have gone against several ranked teams.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue that TCU has, and I think that's what could also play in Tennessee's favor, is the Big 12 is one conference. 9 teams that TCU plays. There's no divisions. The SEC has 14 teams, 2 7-team divisions, and because Tennessee and Georgia are in that same division, I think that actually does help Tennessee out just because they would be playing for a conference championship if they were in the other division. They would be playing for a conference championship if they were in just a regular, normal conference, not the SEC. I think that does help them in their favor because there's not too many one-loss teams, or there's not even, outside of Georgia and Ohio State and Michigan maybe.
Right.
There's nobody else that I would take over Tennessee, even with 0 losses because of what Tennessee has done this year.
I got one more question, and then we'll talk just a little bit of NFL real quick. North Carolina, 15th ranked, is going to go against Wake Forest. We know Wake Forest put a pretty damn good job on Clemson back when Clemson was at number 5 spot. They actually took them to overtime and lost that game. When I look at North Carolina, I'm really super impressed with their quarterback, May, and what he's done. The only thing that I guess if anybody wants to hold it against is the fact that, maybe he hasn't played against all the best competition. But at the same time, his body work is amazing. When you look at him in the draft, if correct me if I'm wrong, is he eligible for the draft this year?
He's a freshman.
Oh crap! Well, then don't worry about it. Because I was thinking he was a little older than that. Okay, never mind then. But you got to admit, man, damn, if he keeps if you're May, then let me ask you this: do you try to go to the transfer portal, try to get on with a better school to maybe improve your draft stock, or do you just stay there with North Carolina?
I stay there with Mac Brown in North Carolina. And I know a lot of people were talking about this today. They were comparing May to Mitch Trubisky, where Mitchell Trubisky had that one really good year at North Carolina and then ends up going to the draft and going number 2. Yeah. Well, the difference was Mitchell Trubisky was a junior, and his first year as a starter was his junior year.
Isn't that crazy?
Drake May's a freshman, putting up the numbers he's putting up this year. He's going to be
got 2 more years of experience.
He's going to be a sophomore next year, putting up the numbers he's putting up again, and then he becomes draft eligible. He'll have 3 years as a starter before he even.
I'll give you a follow-up question to that real quick. Matt Brown was let go from Texas sometime back, a hot minute ago. And then, of course, he slides over to, NC State or North Carolina. I mean, not NC State, North Carolina University. We see how well North Carolina is doing. We see the development of the freshman May. What are your thoughts on, how good of a coach Matt Brown is?
I'm not necessarily going to say Matt Brown is a great head coach. I just think he's a great recruiter. And if you can get enough talent to be in your program based on how you recruit, it's going to make your coaching that much easier. And you saw it at Texas. You saw it at Texas when he won the national championship that year with Vince Young and that group of players that he had. The next several years after that, Texas was not a good football team because Mac Brown was not recruiting well those next couple of years because he put so much into the team that won the national title that he kind of got away from doing the things that got him there. Right. And now he goes to North Carolina, and the first year with North Carolina was a rebuilding year where they went from 3-9 to 6-6. But after that, they've been a constant ACC title contender because of the recruiting that Mac Brown's been able to do and all the players he's been able to get in there.
And speaking of recruiting, you're right, because now look at Texas, right? They brought in Sarkisian, and of course, then they were able to pick up the illustrious Arch Manning, the grandson. And we know what all he did at the high school, and he broke both of his uncle's records, and he's, obviously he's looking pretty damn hot. How well now, because I believe Texas, correct me if I'm wrong, but they go to the SEC next year. How do you see the Archie Manning effect? What will that have on recruiting, along with Sarkisian, obviously? But what will be the Archie Manning effect on recruiting to Texas, and what will it make Texas, you think, in the SEC, which we know how tough that is, right?
I think it's going to help Texas immensely because a lot of recruits are going to want to play with Manning. A lot of recruits from Texas are going to want to play with Manning. A lot of recruits from the South are going to want to play with Manning. A lot of recruits from California are going to want to play with Manning. And now you're moving to the SEC. The recruits that Alabama were getting from Texas, the recruits that Georgia was getting from Texas, may now go to Texas. They may stay in Texas now to play with Manning, and if that's the case, now you're adding another threat to the SEC because all those good Texas players are actually staying in-state to play with Manning and to play with Texas.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and that's why I think with Texas going to the SEC and able to grab a guy like Arch Manning, as a recruit, that really is going to help them make that transition a little bit easier because of the people that they're going to be able to recruit. And obviously having Sarkisian, under the Saban tree as your coach, I mean, those are things that is going to make Texas transition to SEC a lot better than probably, let's say, Oklahoma. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And nothing against Oklahoma too, because they got a really good coach in Venables. And we know what he did with Clemson. So, I mean, we'll have to wait and see how Oklahoma looks. But what a time to be alive. Jeez, man. It's going to get good. I really believe between now and, the start of the playoffs, I mean, and who's in and who's going against who, it's going to be really good.
There's a monster at PJ Masks HQ.
Well, the Eagles best. The 72 Dogs.
No.
I know. Hey, look, I'm not saying they're going to. Well, I do want to look at a couple of things. We know that, New England got pretty close, right? I mean, New England, they did all the way to the end of the regular season. Of course, then they obviously lost, in the playoffs, and that ended their perfect season. But, you look at the Eagles. I mean, let's think about it just for a minute. You look at a team like the Eagles, they're 8-0. By far, going forward, they honestly had the easiest schedule in the NFL. And so I'm wondering, bringing a guy like Quinn, that defensive guy, into an already stout defensive unit that the Eagles have just makes it, in my opinion, a little bit better. We know they got the Commanders on Monday, and barring something stupid or crazy or an injury or God knows whatever else, they should be 9-0 coming out of that. And then they play what? Indy, That should be a win. If it's not, and Jeff Saturday beats you, you might as well just hang it up and go find something else with your life. Green Bay, okay. It's not the Green Bay we remember. It's a Green Bay that, quite frankly, has gone into the tank. Tennessee Titans, if you think Malik Willis is going to get the job done there, and even if Tannehill comes back, I mean, they're going to struggle. So what does that really leave? Giants, Bears, Dallas, Saints, Giants again. I think the only one in that whole schedule, the only one that can give them a loss or who has the best chance at giving them a loss would be a Dak Prescott-led Dallas Cowboys. Would you agree or disagree?
I agree there, but I also think that Philadelphia is going to have home field wrapped up by week 16 anyways, that you may see them rest some of their starters at the end of the year, and then they just drop a game late in the year because it doesn't matter.
If they do that, I'm going to slap them in the face. But again, should they do that? I mean, I guess from a logical standpoint, yeah. But if they do that, I'd be so upset. But it is what it is. You know, they have a potential MVP candidate. We know in Hurts. The guy's just playing amazing. I think he's thrown 18 touchdowns, 2 picks. The only weakness I could imagine in that team on both sides of the ball is if they did not stay grounded, if they lost their hunger for, the perfect season, if they, got overconfident and, maybe played down to their competition, those would be the only weaknesses that I think could take them out of it in terms of winning at the regular season anyway. That would keep them from going at least 15-0. And then you got to figure, okay, if you get to the playoffs and you're undefeated, what would your chances be there? And I think that's where I think they, like you said, they just like New England, I think that's where they lose it. I think they get a 7% chance to go undefeated, possibly, in the playoffs. Well, not 7%. I mean in the regular season. So, because I think they got 15, 35, and 1 is the record of the next 6 opponents outside of the Cowboys.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I agree with what you're saying. In terms of that, man, it's going to be hard. I mean, once you hit the playoffs, but if they can get to the playoffs, you don't. Who do you have beat them in the playoffs if they do get undefeated to the playoffs?
I think honestly, it's going to come down to Minnesota and Philadelphia again. I mean, looking at the rest of the NFC, those have been the 2 most consistent teams all year. The only loss that Minnesota has was to Philadelphia, and yes, Philadelphia kicked the ever-living shit out of them, but It was week 2. It wasn't like week 14 when these 2 teams were playing. Minnesota's a much different-looking team than what they were in week 2, and the same thing with Philadelphia. They're a much different team than what they were in week 2 when they played Minnesota the first time. And I think if Minnesota can make the adjustments, especially the biggest adjustment they would have to make is figuring out how to defend the read option with Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders. And if Minnesota can figure out how to defend that, I think they would be in a much better position to knock off Philly.
I want 3 percentages. The first percentage is, what percentage do you put on them going undefeated to get to the playoffs? The second percentage would be, what do you think their chances are, or what would be the percentage of them getting to the Super Bowl? And then the third percentage would be, what do you have them winning the Super Bowl? What percent? If you had to get those 3 percentages, what would you put it at?
Percentage they go undefeated, 20%. What was the second one?
So the second would be, what would be the percentage of them making it to the Super Bowl?
Let's take a look at the assembled team.
40%.
And then what would your percentage be of winning the Super Bowl, which would give them that perfect season if they were able to get all that?
3%.
Hey, I never go against stat guys. Going against stat guys like going against Tom Brady. Unless you're playing fantasy football, in which case I own stat guys. So it is what it is.
Hey, I'm on a 3-game win streak right now, and I'm up 19-0 this week. So
hey, listen, you had to get a 3-game win streak. Otherwise, you're gonna be sitting down there with Damien, and nobody wants to be sitting down there with Damien. What a time to be alive, man! Damn. Hey, listen, I was there with you. I think at one point I was 0-3, and I was at 19th, and Damian was at 20. And I think Frankie said, "Hey, Jay's hanging down here with Damian." And I said, "Oh, hell no. I had to make a few moves." Man. All right. Hey, last topic, and we're going to get up on out of here and go watch us some college football, man. Jazz. Is this team the real deal? Interesting. They're currently 10-3. The number one in the West. They're a half a game behind the Bucks, who are 10-2 in the East. They're only a half game out of being tied with the best team in the league, right? I tell you, Dustin, it's crazy, man. I did not see this happening, man. They are definitely defying my expectations. They're thriving. I should say, John Clarkson is thriving as a starter. He's giving you I think 22 or no, I think he's giving you 17 points, I believe it was 2 assists, no, 5 assists. So he's really doing a good job being a playmaker and not just a gunner. And then you got Markanian. I mean, damn, this dude's giving you 22, 8-2 at the small forward position. When I look at this Utah Jazz, I don't see a team filled with superstars. I just see a basketball team playing good, cohesive team ball. And sometimes that's all you need to win championships is a little bit of talent, a good head coach that can put you in the right spots and get you the right game planning, and they're just playing good, cohesive team ball, man. And I think that's what the Jazz are doing. What's your thoughts on the Utah Jazz?
When Quinn Snyder elected to step away, I thought Utah was going to be one of the worst teams in the Western Conference, honestly, because Quinn Snyder was a very underrated head coach. He had the third best winning percentage in the NBA the last 3 years behind Steve Kerr and Mike Budenholzer, which nobody realizes until they actually look at how good of a team Utah had when he was there. So when he left, I figured Utah was just going to go down the crapper. Then they trade away Rudy Gobert. They trade away Donovan Mitchell. And I'm like, well, that's basically your sign that you are in a full-blown rebuild mode and you really don't care how you finish this year. And now you look at the position they're in, and they have to be the biggest surprise in the NBA right now. Jordan Clarkson has primarily been a role player his entire career. He's playing at an all-star level right now. Lauri Markkanen was the number 7 pick in the draft 6 years ago, and when he was with Chicago, he put up decent numbers, but he never put up the numbers he's putting up right now. This was the type of player that the Bulls were hoping they had when they had Markkanen. And had these been the numbers he was putting up in Chicago, they would have never gotten rid of him in Chicago. And now he's finally starting to come into his own as a player. You still have Mike Conley Jr. for that veteran leadership. You still have a lot of the other role pieces that this team had last year. So, I mean, you have to be impressed, especially with the new head coach coming in there and being able to keep this team together after losing Gobert and Mitchell and just 2 important pieces that have been with this team for the last 5-6 years. You just have to be impressed with what they've done, and I'm not going to be surprised if they're a top 3 seed in the East or in the Western Conference when the season's over. I just think that they're going to be able to ride this hot streak for most of the year and just play consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, man, it just shows you, man. You don't have to be like the Lakers and go get a Westbrook and Anthony Davis and Dwight Howard and LeBron James, and still you can't even get past the play-in. I mean, you don't have to have all these star-studded people to make it work. You can have, good, talented guys, play good, cohesive ball, man. And I think sometimes we get so much of that. And I think sometimes the owners get so much that they want to get to draw off these superstars that really kind of hurts the team. Would you agree or disagree?
Oh, I 100% agree, and that's kind of the thing that in the NBA, that is the one sport I think you can get away with not having a bunch of stars.
Right.
If you look at the Miami Heat, for example, Jimmy Butler's the best player on the Miami Heat, but you wouldn't consider him a superstar. You would consider him an all-star, but not a superstar. Right. And then the rest of that Miami Heat roster, they might have a couple all-stars, maybe. But other than that, it's a bunch of players that know their role on that team, and they just play that role so well that it works for them. There's a lot of teams in the NBA that have that kind of a roster build where you might have one superstar, but then you have just a bunch of role players that just gel really well together, or like the Miami Heat. You don't have a superstar at all. You just have a bunch of players that understand their role with the team. They understand the coaching and the culture that has been put in place, and they just thrive off of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, a lot of times I think like you said, you don't have to have those superstars. What you need is, a good fundamental starting five, and then have you, two or three really good, solid bench players that can come in and relieve when they need to relieve. But a lot of people overlook that bench and how important it is to have a good bench. You don't have to have, like you said, all those superstars, but you need to have guys that come in on those bench situations that know their roles, know where to contribute. And if you can get a good, solid bench production, I mean, I think that's just as huge as having a good, solid starting five. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is what it is, man. All right, we're going to get into some final thoughts, and we're going to call it a night, my brother. Justin, final thoughts, brother. Anything in particular?
I'm just looking forward to MLB free agency. I just think now that we're, 3 years away from that COVID-shortened season that we had in 2020, I think this will be kind of that first year that teams are going to want to be aggressive earlier as opposed to waiting until January and February to making these free agent deals. Especially when you look at the free agents that are out there right now, Correa, Turner, Judge, Rizzo, DeGrom, Verlander, and just the list of free agents that they have out there. I'm just curious to see who spends the money, how many years they're willing to commit to these people, and just how much it's going to drastically change the way the baseball world looks next year, because you could have another Seattle team come out of nowhere just based on one or two big free agent signings this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, again, and that's one thing I hope the Astros don't do. I don't think, they don't need to go after all these guys. I think, they just need to secure the guys that are important to the team. And then if they have a need here or there, they need to fill it and do it. But like you said, I wouldn't be worried about bringing back Verlander at 35 or 45. I'd be worried about bringing back a guy like Montero or Mancini, maybe going after a guy like Contreras. Fill those smaller holes that will keep that team cohesively good. And I think you're going to be fine. What worries me about baseball is the teams like San Fran that will, go out of their minds trying to buy the services of an Aaron Judge to the own detriment of their team if they can't fill the other positional or pitching needs that they may have. You know what I mean?
What was that?
I'm just saying, like, what worries me is, a team like, for example, the 49ers, the Giants, the San Francisco Giants, going after a guy like Judge and giving him everything in the kitchen sink to bring him in, and then not necessarily having the money or whatever you need to do to get the other positional needs.
Well, I've gone on record to say this on the baseball show that I do with Chris, and I'll say it on your show right now. The fact that the Giants GM said he would not be outbid for Aaron Judge is a problem. Because if you're going to make claims like that and guarantee your fans that you will not be outbid for Aaron Judge, you better hope damn sure that you get him, or you will not have a job the day after free agency is over. And that kind of plays into the hands of the Yankees now, because if the Giants are sitting here saying they're not going to be outbid, the Yankees can jack that price up all they freaking want. And Giants would have to match it if they're not going to get outbid. So if the Yankees really want to jack that price up to $400, $500 million, they can do that, and then they can pull out at the last minute, and the Giants are stuck signing him for $500 million.
How crazy is that, right? And it can happen. Hey, listen, we know it can happen. And excuse me. That's what I think. I haven't sneezed all day. That's the problem where baseball is. You get these guys, and it's not to say that Aaron Judge doesn't worth all this money. We know Aaron Judge is worth the money, but the problem is that by the time they pay him what he's worth, it just hurts the rest of the options that you have to build around a guy like him. So that makes me wonder, can Aaron Judge really ever make it to a World Series, based on the amount of money he's going to command and the lack of being able to build around it?
I think he can, but the best position that Aaron Judge needs to be put in is a team that has a young pitching staff with a lot of young pitchers that are still under team control. You can't.
Interesting.
You can't.
That means the Astros are there, because God knows the Astros pitchers are young as hell.
you can't send him to a team like the Yankees that has Garrett Cole for $30-some million, Frankie Montas for like another 12 or 13 million. Nestor Cortez is going to get paid. Jameson Taillon's making like 20 million. You can't send him to a team like that and expect to give him the $400 million.
I've also heard. Hey, you know what else I've heard? And I don't know if it was ESPN, Sporting News, or Bleacher. I know on one of those sources I heard that the Yankees are on the hot seat to try to bring in Verlander.
Yeah, Verlander to the Yankees I can see, just because I said I think they give him $35 million for 1 year. Put him up there with Garrett Cole and see if you can ride Garrett Cole and Justin Verlander into the World Series for 1 year and go after it. And if you get a good year out of Verlander, turn around and re-up with him for 1 more year. I think it'll just be more of a year-by-year basis with Verlander now wherever he ends up signing. I don't think he gets a multi-year deal, and if he does, it's not going to be more than 2.
Yeah, I like I said, I see him as a 1-year deal too, just based on age and Tommy John. Yeah, I'm doing. And plus, all that money, you're not going to try to lose all that money, to a guy like you said that has age and Tommy John. And if the Yankees can do that, how are they going to try to keep Burke? Can they bring in a guy like Verlander? They just signed Severino to a pretty good contract. Can they bring in a guy like Verlander in and then still keep the enormous contract of a guy like Aaron Judge?
Yeah, I don't know. Aaron Judge to me is the biggest mystery of free agency. I originally said the Trey Turner, Carlos Correa contracts were going to be kind of where the dominoes would fall, and once those guys signed, everything else would fall in place. I think it's going to be the opposite. I think Aaron Judge is going to be the domino effect.
Oh, absolutely.
Where the
thing about that is too, if they brought in a guy like Verlander, and then like you said, they get into a bidding war, whatever, with San Fran, and then they bail out. San Fran takes Judge away from them. Well, now look at the rest of their damn team. Stanton's 33, LeMahieu's 34, Donaldson's 37. I mean,
Rizzo's 33 if he comes back.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a really old team.
That is the only reason why I can see them going after a guy like Verlander, because they have such an old roster. They might want to just try to run it back with this roster 1 or 2 more times to see if they can get there. And if they can't get there, then you'll start to see them kind of unload and go younger.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And hey, on closing statements, Steve Kerr needs to figure this damn rotational crap out, because at some point, Steph Curry can't be the only guy on your team carrying that weight. He's going to break down at some point. This man needs to figure out this damn rotation with
he doesn't need to figure it out.
You know what I mean?
He doesn't need to figure it out. He needs to get rid of Draymond Green. Get rid of Draymond Green. You put James Wiseman at your 5. You put Kayvon Looney at your 4. Problem solved.
They're going to have to figure that out.
Ever since that incident with Jordan Poole and Draymond Green, the team chemistry's been off.
And you can see it. You can evidently see it.
because Jordan Poole got paid, 5 days after that punch? And Draymond Green did not get paid? So that chemistry's been off ever since that happened, and I think the best case scenario right now for the Warriors is just move on from Draymond Green, put Kayvon Looney at the 4, put James Wiseman at the 5, and then you go with Curry, Thompson, Wiggins, or Curry, Poole, Wiggins, if you want to do it that way.
Yeah, because they're going to have to figure something out, because like I said, the way it's going right now, man, Curry is just having to carry the crap out of that team, and I just don't know how long he can do it at the level and the minutes and everything that they're requiring from him. I mean, it's a lot. And I think mentally and emotionally, it's a lot. Not that he's a weak guy, but we all know Curry's a very mentally tough individual. But but all mortal human beings wear down after a while.
Where did you get that?
It happens. All right, folks, man. I appreciate everybody tuning in tonight for Unscripted. Stat Guy, man, I love you, brother. Thank you for copping on. Give me a co-host, because, man, I was about to do this thing all of Capello or solo, or wherever the word is for it. But, hey, I appreciate you coming on tonight, brother.
Not a problem, Jay.
All right, man. Hey, everybody, man. It's another edition of Unscripted. We'll be back on Tuesday That's our anniversary show for 2 years. Good Lord, I can't believe we've been doing this for 2 years. And a lot of people have come in the show, gone out the show, guests, appearances. We'll talk about all that on Tuesday. But man, I appreciate everybody tuning in. And yeah, man, y'all be good.